Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to episode 6 of the CPA Guide podcast. If this is your first time with us, my name is Brian Kessler, and I am the author of the CPAGuide.com, which is a blog I started to help you prepare and dominate the CPA exam. For my regular listeners, I apologize for it being over a month since my last episode, but I was just out in Montana for 3 weeks to do some backpacking through Glacier National Park, and I was asked by my little sister to officiate her wedding in the beautiful town of Anaconda, Montana. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. I was asked to marry my sister. Ha ha, very funny. So today's episode is going to be a very special one. I'm super excited to be able to pick the brain of a highly successful CPA who has had a huge impact on thousands of accountants around the U.S. His name is Steve Martin of MDS CPA Review. So my hope is that by the end of this interview, you're going to have tons of actionable items that you can apply to your study schedule and your daily routine. You also get to find out if Steve would rather go back to boot camp or retake the CPA exam. And I'm also super excited to be able to offer you a scholarship giveaway of 1 copy of Steve Martin's CPA Review course. So pay attention as we reveal the details on how to register at some point during this interview. As always, for more details, you can visit the show notes for this episode at the CPA Guide, thecpaguide.com/session006.html to find exclusive coupon code that Steve also provided for his course if you are interested in it, and also just to find more details about the scholarship as well and how to sign up. All right, well, I won't keep you waiting any longer. Let's get started.
The CPA Guide.
thecpaguide.com.
Let's learn how to dominate the CPA exam together. And here is your host and CPA Guide, Brian Kessler. Because if he can pass the CPA exam, anyone can.
Welcome, everybody. One of the great things about having my own podcast is to be able to interview people who are much more successful than myself, and hopefully be able to share with you their habits and secrets to success in accounting. My guest today is renowned Ohio CPA and review course instructor Steve Martin of MDS CPA Review. Steve obtained his MBA from The Ohio State University, has practiced law in Ohio, was a full-time professor at Capital University, and has worked in the CPA review course industry since 1985. Welcome, Steve. So glad you could be here today.
Yeah, it's nice to talk to you, Brian.
Thanks. So, Steve, as somebody who's working every day with aspiring CPA candidates, I'm sure you see some trends between people who are successful and those who struggle to pass the CPA exam. What do you think candidates struggle with the most today while taking the exam, and do you have any suggestions for those people?
Today, as compared to years ago when I took the exam, I think the biggest issue is procrastination.
Sure.
When I took the exam, we had a deadline. Everyone knew when we were going to take the exam, and if I had told the boss after the first week in May or 1st November that I had not taken the exam last week, he'd probably tell me to update my resume. Now no one knows when you take it. No one knows when you fail it. We know when you pass it because you tell us, but because there's no pressure, you say, well, I'll get to it later, or I'll do this later, I can put it off till later, I can do and you look for every excuse not to study. And frankly, every excuse not to study, that was something that I had always existed, because the CPA exam, frankly, is the hardest thing I've ever done. I've done 3 hard things in my life. I went to boot camp. I served in the military for several years. And then I took the bar exam, CPA exam. I didn't break a sweat on the CPA exam. On the bar exam, excuse me.
Sure.
But if they told me I have to do 2 of these again, I'm going back to boot camp before I take CPA exam. So the CPA exam is always hard. And what happens is once you start studying, things that you start doing questions and things that previously appeared repulsive, disgusting, and repugnant start appearing attractive to you. You start thinking like, gee, have I cleaned the bathroom lately or something like that. So there's always a natural tendency to procrastinate and put it off. But now, since the test is not scheduled for you, you think you can defer things and put them off for a long time, and that's the biggest problem now. It's much more temptation not to study than there used to be.
Yeah, I totally agree, because when I was just out of college, I kind of slacked off and took a couple parts, but then ended up failing them. And then the next thing I knew, I was traveling because I was in audit, and the last thing you want to do is study in the hotel room at the end of the night. So I completely agree. So for the people that you see who are, and I put this in quotes, easily passing the CPA exam, what do you see them doing that other students don't do?
Well, let me just share with one of my instructors. His name is Justin Linscott. He's 30 years old, and he's already a partner in a large regional CPA firm, and he's everything. And when he decided to take the exam, he did what I did. He took my advice, but he's a more recent example. Let me share with you what he did. He didn't have any children yet, but he wanted to start a family. He knew the firm was going to start beating on him, like, you know, what happens in a CPA firm when you're young. You work really hard. So he wanted to get this thing out of the way, and he had an agreement with his lovely wife that here's the schedule. And they set up the schedule. In the morning, he'd study a little bit. He'd go to work. He'd come home and eat with his wife and spend a little time with his wife. And then he'd go off to his study and study some more. And then on weekends, he would study more. He had a schedule. He had a set schedule, and his spouse was supportive of that schedule because they knew that if he did what he was supposed to do for a short period of time, and he did it I think got it done in 4.5, 5 months. Wow. If he did it, if he set a schedule and stuck to a schedule and didn't procrastinate, didn't put it off, didn't look for excuses, but did everything that we told him to do, he believed he would pass, and he did. He averaged scores in the 90s. Wow. So the key is, and not everyone's going to do that. I mean, to be honest with you, my scores weren't that good, and I did everything that Mr. Becker told me to do when I took his course. My scores weren't that good, but I passed. Sure. Not everyone's going to do that good, but you're going to have a lot better chance if you do what your coaches tell you to do. After all, you're paying for the coaching. Do what your coaches tell you to do. Make sure you set a schedule and stick to it. That's what you have to do.
No, I totally agree. And yeah, and my wife and I, we did something very similar. We were just dating at the time, but I set up a calendar, and I was like, okay, from 6 to 8 on Friday nights, we're hanging out, and all the other time I'm going to be spending it studying. So,
yep.
So I get a lot of the listeners, you know, they probably haven't even started studying for the CPA exam. So what's your best recommendation to somebody who's thinking about taking the CPA or has just started the process?
Well, I firmly believe that 99% of all CPA candidates do need some coaching. It's an extremely difficult exam. Like I said, it's the hardest exam I ever took, hardest thing I've ever done. And there are those that can pass the exam with textbooks, and they're usually college professors. But typically you need some coaching. And when you hire that coach, and that's basically what you're doing when you buy a review course, you're hiring a coach. And you know, I believe my course works, but you know, there's other coaches in this business. And typically, if you listen to your coach and do what your coach tells you to do, in due course, you'll be successful. Will everyone pass all 4 the first time? Absolutely not. Statistics show that's simply not true. Even the students who work really hard will fail occasionally. It happens. And there's no shame in failing the CPA exam. Some of your most successful CPAs failed more than one occasion. And, you know, you don't have to get high scores on the CPA exam. The only people who brag about passing the CPA exam are members of the 300 Club. So it's not like you have to get it all the first time or get all 90s. That's not necessary. But you really need to listen to your coach. And for those people who played sports, they understand this. You know, when you play sports, I think CPA exam is a lot like sports because it's not like college. In college, failure is not an option. And most of us never failed in college. Most of us got good scores. But in sports, if you play sports, you fail all the time. I mean, I played baseball. I mean, I got a hit probably, you know, 25% of the time, or I was at the plate. That's how bad I hit. And sometimes I was a pretty good glove, but sometimes the ball just would. How did I miss that? But if you're doing things the way your coach tells you to do, in due course you get better, and you'll get through it, and you'll succeed. That's the key. Is just stick to it and do what your coach tells you to do.
No, I totally agree. And I was one of those people. I failed a couple times, and I think for me, just learning from my mistakes, like I just took a step back and I was like, okay, what am I doing wrong? And really what I was doing wrong was treating the CPA exam like a college exam.
Yeah.
And I was trying to cram in the way that worked in college, but you just can't it doesn't work the same with the CPA exam. I'm sure some of your students, they have families with kids and significant others. What do you suggest to them to help juggle all these different aspects of their life while taking this CPA exam? What do you think is the most important thing that they should focus on?
Well, I'll give you another example. I think there are 3 approaches to taking the CPA exam. This is how I teach it. One approach is to do what I call the boot camp approach. And some students are fortunate enough to have the summer off before they start work. And those students, what they do is they take my class, they devote all summer, or at least most of the summer, to studying the exam. And that's all they do. They just study. And you can do that if you're not working. I've had a couple students work and do that, by the way. They're brilliant, but I don't know how they do it. But
wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. But a second approach is the 6-month plan, and that's sort of what Justin Linscott was on that I described a minute ago.
Okay.
But he didn't have children then. The third approach is another one of my associates named Morgan Waits, and I think you've exchanged emails with Morgan.
Yeah.
Morgan, the CPA. And when she decided to work on the exam, I believe she had a child on the way. And she had been married a short while, and she knew that given her family situation, she just couldn't get it done in 6 months. So what she did is she did what I call the 12-month plan. And I've sort of become a convert to the 12-month plan in recent years. I wasn't in the past, because the guys my age, we did it in 6 months. We try to do it in 6 months. But in the 12-month plan, what you do is you apply for 2 parts the first 6 months, and you work on 2 parts. And, you can actually retake a part if you fail it, but you focus on 2 parts for the first 6 months. And then the second 6 months, you focus on the next 2 parts. And that's what Morgan did, and that allowed her to pay attention to the other things in her life. She was working, too, in forensic accounting at the time. And so when you got, when you got children, work, spouse, kids, you have to spend time with your kids. There's no way to get around it, and they need it. So
sure.
I think when that happens, I think the 12-month plan is a better approach.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I locked myself in to all 4 parts at once just to save a few bucks. And then I ended up failing one part, but then I was locked in to take the next part, so I'd study for that one. And then I felt like I wasted a lot of my time when I should have just signed up for 1 or 2 parts and then just focused on those 2 and then moved on to the next ones. I mean, do you agree with that?
I agree that I believe you should never sign up just for 1 part unless it's your last part. It's not cost effective. But I do believe you don't necessarily have to sign up for all 4. I like that. That's why I like the 12-month plan, because you sign up for 2, you spread those application fees across a couple parts. After all, we are accountants.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But yeah, that's my approach. Those are my 3 approaches: the 15-week plan, the 6-month plan, or the 12-month plan.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Okay. So I know it's not comparing apples to apples, but my dad, he was, back when he took the exam back in '84, so he and I always get into an argument over which exam is more difficult, taking it, over the 2.5 days like he did, or what I had to do to pass the CPA exam. What's your opinion on, difficulty?
Well, I've been, between taking the CPA exam and coaching the CPA exam, it's been maybe 34 years, 35 years. And I believe in no uncertain terms the new exam's a lot harder in terms of content.
Right.
When I took the exam, the Internal Revenue Code was maybe 1 inch thick. Now it's 2.5, 3 inches, or it's actually maybe 6 inches thick. For those that look in books, we don't use books anymore, as you know. And,
right.
And then there was, when I took the exam, I think there were like 40 FASB pronouncements. When they codified it, there were 170. When I took the exam, the auditing standards were, I don't know, maybe a couple dozen. Now there's 130 or so. There was no GASB. IFRS didn't exist. They didn't test business topics on the exam like they do today. The breadth, and I believe depth as well, of the exam is much more difficult than it was when I took it a long, long time ago.
Sure. So, thanks so much for sharing all this actionable content for all the CPA candidates out there, Steve. I know that, I wish I would have had this conversation with you back before I even sat for the CPA exam, because I did a ton of this stuff wrong. Something that personally fascinates me is learning about the habits of successful people. And so I love comparing my day-to-day habits with theirs to see if I can personally improve myself in any way. And so I've kind of compiled a few questions that I'd like to ask you rapid fire. So as a successful CPA and teacher, what does the first hour of your morning routine look like?
Well,
how do you get ready to tackle the day?
I have to qualify everything, because about 5 years ago, I started my retirement process.
Oh, okay.
And I quit practicing law. Last year, I left the university. And other than ethics speeches, which I still do, but I'm ending that this year, all I do is, besides that, CPA review. But I will give you my habit for the 25 years or so that I had before I retired from practicing law.
Sure. When you were the most busy.
But I was most busy. Here's what I was doing when I was most busy.
Okay.
I had a full-time law practice. I was a managing director of at one time I got up 24 lawyers that I had founded the firm with some other lawyers. I was a full-time college professor at Capital. I taught part-time at Ohio State MBA, at Masters of Accounting and the law school. And I taught made about 30 ethics presentations a year. And I one time actually taught as much as 96 CPA review classes a year.
Wow.
I was busy. But what I did is I kept a very precise schedule, and I scheduled everything. And I would get up early in the morning. What I would do is, let's say I usually had classes at the university at least twice a week at 8 o'clock. I would always get the first section, so I'd get there early. I'd usually get there 6:30 to 7, so that means I was getting up at 5:30. Wow. And I would always have work with me. I would always carry work, and I could do that, with a computer, and I could always carry some law work with me. And I was always, if I had some things to do, I would always clear my email, or I would do some law work before class started. And then when class was over, I would typically either go to my office at the university, or go back to my law office and do law work for the rest of the day until probably 5 or so. And then I'd often have a class to teach in the evening. I go out and teach that class. So I was, it was pretty busy. It was from dusk to dawn, it was from dawn to well after dusk, even before dawn for that matter. But then he'd go home and I'd have dinner and, that sort of thing. And I typically would work weekends. I typically would teach on weekends or work in the law office on weekends. It was, I worked, when you're a licensed professional, you don't work 40-hour weeks. And so my week routinely would take 60 hours. That would be commonplace.
Sure.
Now, having said that, the upside of that is I had a plan. My wife and I both had a plan. My wife's a registered nurse. We had a plan. We planned our work. We worked our plan. I started to retire at age 57. And I'm other than doing CPA review, I'm pretty much retired now. My wife retires completely next year. So we're retiring quite young. And we don't have to work for the rest of our life. So it's that's the benefits of that. And you might as well work when you're young because you got the energy to do it.
Absolutely.
When you get older, people don't believe this when they're young, but when you get older, things begin to wear out. And they just break inexplicably, and that's what you got to deal with. So get it done now, and so you can enjoy your retirement. That's my attitude.
Absolutely. Totally agree. So it sounds like you're more of a morning person than a night owl.
I am.
Is that correct?
I'm still a morning person.
Okay. I'm the complete opposite. I do my best work at like midnight. It's kind of funny. So something I've found that to be successful in your career, and especially for studying to pass the CPA exam, is that productivity and the ability to stay focused are so crucial. And, with social media, cell phones, and cable TV and everything, it's just getting harder and harder to accomplish this. So what do you do to stay focused and productive?
Well, one thing, let me just make it clear, one thing to stay focused and productive is one reason I was able to do all the stuff I did for so long. I still managed for large parts of that time to stay physically fit. And it's hard to do that, but you're much more focused when you maybe have a run in the morning or a walk in the morning, you work out. You don't have to be an Olympic athlete.
Sure.
Believe me, even at my age, I go for walks. And those walks make it a lot easier for me to stay focused. The other thing is you have to be able to compartmentalize things. And I had when I was really busy, there were a lot of different compartments. And you got to put one compartment off to the side. Now, that's not to say, by the way, you can't keep your eye on another compartment in case something comes up and you have to deal with it. But it is difficult to sometimes keep those things in their cubbyhole until you can really focus on them more effectively. But to be totally honest with you, I got a lot more productive when the internet became more available and an email was available. And when I could check my email everywhere, that caused my productivity to spike even more. And oh yeah, I just got to manage it. You really have to manage it, but yeah, you can, because you can work anywhere.
Yeah, that is true. For me personally, sometimes I find that checking email or writing emails, like, I just do it to keep busy as opposed to doing it to be productive. So that's something that I always personally kind of check myself doing.
I only do that to be productive, and that's why I like email and text for that matter, because I'll talk to you on the phone, but I prefer to exchange an email or a text, because you call someone on the phone, you got to, how the kids.
Right.
No. And frankly, you're probably too busy for that, and I'm probably too busy for that. If I need something, send you an email, you answer me, we're both happy. That's how you should use email and texting. That's why social media, I think, it isn't a waste of time. I'm not quite in the Betty White category, but I think you got to put it in its place. But you can use email and texting very effectively if you work at it.
So I guess for a student who's studying, would you recommend shutting off the internet whenever you're trying to focus on studying, or is taking a 5-minute break here and there, is that okay, do you think?
Well, a few minutes, yeah, you need to take a break once in a while to refresh your mind because what happens is, from a learning perspective, every hour or so you need to take a small break, because when you take a little break, your mind consolidates. We used to call this file maintenance in the old days when computers were so slow. Your mind will, and this is what happens when you sleep for that matter, your mind will consolidate, and if you're having problems solving a problem, for example, you can actually step away and pause and maybe do something else for a little bit, and you'll come back and all of a sudden, I got it! Because your mind will work on the problem subconsciously, whether you know it or not.
Right.
So, yeah, breaks are important. But on the other hand, I'll tell you, I tell my students, there's a study method in my course, and if they're up against the wall and they can't figure something out, they're stumped. What I want them to do is send me an email immediately, so I can try to answer it as quick as I possibly can. I usually get back to people within an hour so they can move on, because the way my homework is set up, if they're stumped on a particular question, the next questions are going to continue to be harder. But if I can help them answer that question now, they can be more productive. So email, in that context, is something you want to use. Don't put it away. Keep it ready.
Yeah, no, and that's something I definitely really push to my viewers too, is don't spin your wheels on any one question for more than 5 minutes, because the CPA exam is so broad, and if you spend 20 minutes on one question, that's 15 minutes you could have been spending on other questions. So
that's when you're doing the exam. Now, when you're doing your homework, though,
yeah,
you need to spend as much time on a question, especially a hard question, as much as you need to make sure you truly understand it. Because you know as well as I do, the examiners can think of a gazillion ways to ask the same question. And so that's the key of understanding the question, because they'll ask it in different ways. Oh, that's sort of like this question, but it's coming at it this way. So when you're doing your homework, though, don't be afraid to spend some extra time. But on the exam, no, you're absolutely right. I recommend students spend no more than 2 minutes on a question.
Yeah.
If they can't get the question in 2 minutes, check mark it, that little flag at the bottom, and come back to it as time permits. I have a schedule I give them how the timing on tests. But yeah, you got to be careful wasting your time on the tests.
Yeah. So when you're going through practice exams and stuff like that, when you do you think it's beneficial to do multiple choice questions over and over, or do you think you should try and find unique multiple questions and always be keeping fresh questions in front of you?
Well, the way I do it is I'm the only person that does this. I have like 5,800 questions. A lot of courses have 5,000 to 6,000 questions. I break my question into 3 sets. I'm the only person that does this. So what you do right after class, or you watch the video, you do the first set. And that's a third of the questions that pertain to that class. And it's in the order of the book. So you open your book in front of you, and you follow along in reviewing the book again, because I reviewed it once with you on the video or in class, and you do that set of questions. And then a week or so later, you'll come back and do a second set pertaining to that class, and they're different questions. And then a week or so later, you do a third set. They're different questions again. So I believe in reviewing and repeating with different questions the first few times through. Then after that, I have you do random exams, and random exams do repeat the same questions. But I don't want you to memorize questions. I want you to repeat them to show that you understand them, and because even then you don't really memorize them all. But the problem is, if you just do the same question over and over and over again, you memorize it without understanding it, and you can't get a 75 by memorizing.
Yep.
I take that back. You can't get a 74 by memorizing. You might get a 75 by memorizing. Let me tell you a story. My scores weren't great. I got 75 to 83, and my 75 was in FAR. And there was a question in FAR when I was doing the homework I never understood, and I kept looking at it and looking at it, trying to understand the stupid thing, and I never really did. But that exact question showed up on my exam. The numbers were doubled, but I didn't try to solve it. I just said, that's the answer. And to this day, that's how I attribute getting my 75 on financial.
That's awesome.
But you can't get the 74 that way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got a 73, and I would have preferred to get a 52. Like, it's just the worst feeling in the world. So, my last question here is, what's the most rewarding thing about your job?
Oh, when people succeed and they pass the exam, and then I see them later on in life, and I have former students who are partners in big firms and CEOs, and it's just see people succeed is really, I think that's why anyone teaches. They like to help people succeed. And that's the most rewarding thing. And people learn that money. I'm pretty successful, and I have been successful to retire at my age, but money does not buy happiness. It makes a real good down payment. It doesn't buy happiness. But there are other things. You get more psychic rewards are what's more important. And I think that's why I always made a little less as a lawyer than I could have, because I took time to teach, because I like to teach. And it gave me a lot of psychic reward over and above the monetary reward I got.
Sure. Cool. Well, thanks so much for sharing, Steve. I know you've got a lot on your plate, but I just wanted to kind of, before we discuss the review course giveaway that everyone's been waiting for, I wanted to ask you a couple questions about your review course, just in case any of my listeners aren't familiar with it. So, what do you think that MDS is doing in the CPA review course industry that no one else is doing?
Well, I think we do 3 or 4 things that are different. One is, got to remember, I learned this business from Mr. Becker himself. I started doing this, and I took his course, and then when I was in law school, I wanted to make a couple bucks. So I took Becker, and then, I started teaching Becker. And it wasn't long before I took over the Columbus course, and it wasn't very long before Mr. Becker took a liking to me, and I started helping him update his course. And Miss Becker said to me was, Steve, when you're writing materials for CPA review, be sparse with your words. Don't treat these people like they never heard the word accounting before. And Mr. Becker's materials actually were quite minimal. Now, his books were thick because all the questions were in paper form, but the actual study materials were quite small. It wasn't very thick at all, because Mr. Becker believed a CPA review course should be honed and focused and should make your studying as efficient as possible. And that's the approach I have taken. And Mr. Becker, the reason I think Mr. Becker could do that is he taught it and he wrote it. Most courses now are owned by big companies, or their materials are written by big companies, and the people who write it, I don't think are teaching it. And I don't think anyone who wrote for Mr. Becker is still working for any of those companies anymore. So they've lost a little focus on CPA review being review, and their books have grown massively thick. And there's a lot of stuff in those books you really don't need. Now, how do I know my books cover everything? Well, as you know, the review courses get questions from the examiners every year, about 200. And I trace all my questions into my books. And every year, depends from year to year, part to part, but it's anywhere from 97 to 100%. You know, Mr. Becker said he only shot for 95%. And I say if you got 97%, you'd be pretty darn happy on the exam. Yeah. And you studied statistics, and you know how hard it is to get to 3% in the tails. So that's what I focus on. I focus on the stuff that's most likely to be on the exam. That's the first thing I do that's different. The other thing I do is I mention my homework pattern. I have got a pattern for the homework. I've got these 3 sets, and there's a plan how you walk through those 3 sets and then do random exams and then do a practice test. And how you study. There's a methodology that I give you in my techniques video. It's actually on my website. Anyone could read it and use it if they wanted to. And then the other thing I do that's different is my videos are different. I'm the only course, I believe, and I've looked at several of them, that streams both the video of me and the book. Some courses stream the book and the voice. You hear the voice, but you don't see the speaker. Some courses have the video, but you don't have the book, and I think it's largely because those people don't write all their own materials, so it's not as easy for them to put the book up on the screen because they buy materials from other courses. And then now Becker's got a very good video. I must admit, I'm not going to denigrate someone they're doing a good job. The difference is with Becker, though, is they have the speaker and the book, but they flip back and forth. It's professionally done, though. If there's one other one I really like, it's that one. But mine, you do it both at the same time. And what that does is I'm trying to keep you as engaged as possible. And if you watch I think you've watched my video, I'm a little bit, I try to make things as interesting as possible, let's put it that way. And then I'm marking up the book, I underline things, I highlight things. It's as close to being in class as you can get without being in class.
Right.
Then finally, the other thing I do is I mentioned that already. Other courses brag about getting back to you in 48 to 72 hours. If me or one of my other instructors not back to you in 48 to 72 minutes, something's wrong. I respond quickly. Technology allows me to do that. And the other reason I'm allowed to do it is I write every bit of material. I answer every question. So I have a pretty darn good idea of what's going on. And frankly, a lot of the questions I get are things I get more than once. There are certain tricky things that people ask, and if I give them a little hint, look at this, or you missed this, and boom, they're over the hump. That's the big difference. I think those are the big differences in my course and other courses. Of course, the price I'm reasonably priced too.
Yeah, and I appreciate giving me the coupon code as well, because you can use, if you go to my review on the CPAGuide.com, there's a coupon code for MDS, the CPA exam, which will get you 20% off the full course. So thanks for giving me that, Steve. I appreciate it. Let's see, so do you have any, I know you've mentioned that you're preparing to retire soon, but do you have any big features that will be coming out soon? And what's your plan for the future once you do end up retiring fully from the review course?
I'm not retiring from the CPA review course anytime soon.
Okay.
But I do have associates that help me, and I'm teaching them how to, they are to me what I was to Mr. Becker. I'm teaching them how to write material efficiently and update and write answers to questions, and we're working on things together right now. We're looking at things. One thing that I think is, we've been trying to figure out the best way to do it, but we've been investigating the possibility of flashcards for a handheld device. The only reason I've been hesitating is I like flashcards. I've studied Japanese for years, and I've been using flashcards for certain aspects of my study for that. And it's great for studying things that are very quick and to the point. But when you've got big lists and formulas, I'm not sure they're that good when they're on a handheld device. But we're taking a look at that. We're also looking at other things where you always got to keep up with technology nowadays. For example, when I started my own course, we just had an in-class thing. Then the internet got to the point where when DVDs came out, and we could put the course on DVDs. We didn't go to high-speed internet because a lot of people didn't have high-speed internet then. Then we moved on to everything would be on high-speed on the internet, because it was that way. It's always updated. So technology causes you to have to reconsider stuff, and we're constantly thinking about how do we keep up with technology. So that's one thing we're looking at. We're constantly looking at more things down the road.
Cool. So if somebody is looking to get in touch with you or find out more about MDS CPA review course, what's the best places that they can go?
All you really do is go to my website,
okay.
Click on Contact Us, and I'll answer that.
All right, and what's your URL?
Well, I don't know. Just put mdscpareview.com.
Okay. All right, that'll be good.
Yep.
All right, so at this point, if it's okay with you, I'd like to review the scholarship giveaway of one free copy of your review course.
Yeah.
Steve and I discussed what the requirements will be to sign up. So what we came up with is that you'll need to go to my website, which is www.thecpaguide.com/mds.html. And there you're going to find the requirements to sign up, which is to leave a comment on that page, which is in 5 sentences or less. Please define in your own words the definition of ethical behavior. And then the second thing that you'll need to do is sign up for the CPA Guide newsletter. The reason why you'd want to do that is so that you can keep in touch with me. I send you my CPA coaching guide newsletter, and then I'll just continue to send you other content that you can't find on my website. So yeah, again, that URL is www.thecpaguide.com/mds.html. And then Steve and his team, in a couple weeks, they'll be going through all the comments, picking the one that they like best, and then they'll be in touch with you over how to gain access to the scholarship review course. At this point, Steve, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add.
No, I think that's good, Brian.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate your time, and I wish you the best of luck.
You too.
All right. We'll talk again.
Thanks.
If you want more of the CPA Guide podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes, or you can go to thecpaguide.com for even more great content about how to pass the CPA exam.
This podcast is only for general advice. It should not be construed as accounting, legal, or any other professional advice. Your particular situation is fact-dependent, and you are recommended to seek the help of a competent professional.